Hey, it's Deborah Poneman, founder of Yes to Success Seminars, where we share knowledge and tools for you to live your ultimate life. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, being perfect. Now, according to Brene Brown, author of several New York Times bestsellers, including Daring Greatly and Braving the Wilderness and The Gifts of Imperfection, the definition of perfectionism goes something like this. Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels the thought, if I look perfect, live perfectly, and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. So Brene goes on to say that perfectionism is self-destructive simply because there's no such thing as perfect. Perfection is an unattainable goal and is in fact really only about perception. We want to be perceived as perfect, but it's unattainable because it doesn't exist. And there's no way to control other people's perception of you, regardless of how much time and energy you spend trying. And perfectionism is addictive because when we experience being judged or blamed or feeling shame, we often believe it's because we weren't perfect enough. So rather than question the source of the faulty logic of perfectionism, we become even more committed to our mission of living, looking, and doing everything exactly right. So how do we overcome perfectionism? We need to be able to acknowledge our vulnerabilities and practice self-compassion. When we become more loving and compassionate with ourselves, and we begin to practice what Brene calls shame resilience, we can begin embracing our imperfections. And it's in the process of embracing our imperfections that we find our truest gifts, as well as create our most meaningful connections and deepest relationships. So first, I want you to notice the difference between perfectionism and healthy striving. Healthy striving is simply wanting to do a good job for positive reasons, and not because you believe that if you're perfect, you can avoid shame, blame, and judgment, all three of which are realities that we just need to accept in life. So when you find yourself rewriting the report for the fourth or fifth time, ask yourself, am I just wanting to do a good job, or am I trying to be perfect in order to avoid shame, blame, or judgment? In other words, God forbid somebody thinking that you're less than perfect. Be honest with yourself. And if the answer is the latter, stop and accept good enough. Just stop and move on. As hard as it is to do, or you can do, believe it or not, something that you're probably also not good at doing, ask for help. It's that simple. You can, at that moment, also remind yourself that perfectionism doesn't exist. Perfection doesn't exist. And even more importantly, no one is going to notice the difference between excellent and what you think is perfect. You can also remind yourself that the time and energy it takes to go from excellent to unobtainably perfect is not worth your health or your relationships, like with your kids or your partner who would love to have that extra half hour with you. Brene Brown also believes that the need to be perfect is what kills creativity. How can you really let your creativity loose when you're afraid to make a mistake? And it kills risk-taking for the same reason. If you take a risk, there is always the chance you won't appear perfect. And you can ask anyone who has achieved great things in life, and they will tell you that taking risks was one of the most important components in creating their success. So now I'm going to give you a test to see if you fall in the category of perfectionist. Okay. So number one, you are, I'll just say the signs of a perfectionist. One, you feel compelled to be the best in everything you do, even if it's something you don't really care that much about. Number two, you're hypercritical and highly conscious of not only your own, but other people's mistakes. Three, you spend much of your time to perfect something, even at the expense of your health, well-being, in relationships. Number 4, you tend to set absolute ideals. There is only black and white, no gray. Number 5, you beat yourself up when the smallest thing goes wrong. 6, you obsessively mull over outcomes over and over in your mind and how you could have done things differently if they didn't turn out perfectly. 7, seeing yourself yet? You're hypersensitive and defensive towards criticism. Number 8, you are so obsessed about achieving your goal that you seldom, if ever, enjoy or even notice the journey. So, if you find yourself on that list, I invite you to let go of the need to be perfect, and maybe just 1 week, try stopping and accepting good enough or asking for help. And remind yourself that perfection doesn't exist. And even more importantly, no one is going to notice the difference between excellent and what you think is perfect. And when you notice yourself on your way from excellent to unobtainably perfect, stop and go and ask your kids if they want to play a game, or ask your partner if he or she would like to take a walk. Or do something you've been putting off, like watching that Netflix show everyone is talking about, and you've been too busy being perfect to watch. And besides, the opposite of perfection isn't imperfection or even mediocrity. It's reality. Sending love and wishing you true and balanced success.